you could say that the eggs were done.
Stop.
Okay.
What?
What the fuck does that mean?
Welcome back, everyone, to S1E1, the show where each week we pick a different sitcom, watch just its pilot episode, and discuss it, ignoring anything we might know about the future run of that show. This week we're going to be talking about Mad About You. Mad About You went 176 episodes over 8 seasons on NBC. Today we're talking about episode 1, which was called Romantic Improvisations, which originally aired September 23rd, 1992. But to get things started, I'm Jay Gags. With me, as always, the guys, Gordo, Joe, Nick, and Ferg. What's going on, everybody?
Heyo.
Heyo.
Don't toy with me, white boy.
So
That
The
line
most
was so out of place.
line in that
Yeah.
entire episode. Not to get into anything weird about the episode, but they said that, and I was like, man, that did not age well.
But before we even get into anything, I wanted to bring up that it's 8 seasons, but only seven seasons in its original run. The 8th season happened 20 years later.
And the 8th season was on
2019.
this unknown network. It didn't do well. Unsurprisingly, you just gotta let things lie sometimes.
Well, no, because I think the Will and Grace reboot did pretty well. I don't want to say reboot.
I know, but
right?
how
'Cause it's
many
not a
reboots
reboot.
have there been?
Soft reboot.
I was gonna say it's
So it's the circumstances at which you present it. Mad About You came back, but there wasn't a lot of talk about it. There wasn't a lot of promotion behind it that I remember.
I think
yeah,
if it
that
was on
happened,
NBC, it would have done better.
You know what it is?
Yeah.
It's the difference of it being on some random network or on Netflix.
Right.
that's
Yeah.
exactly it. Yeah,
Okay, so it's Impact Wrestling versus AEW, or
it has to be good too, because if it's,
Well, I can't say in full
I know, I
honesty
haven't
that
seen
I
that
watched
show.
season.
all of Fuller House, and that really wasn't good.
Yeah, but it's just
That's fair.
the situation
It was
you
great.
presented in. But it's just kind of weird to think a show like Mad About You, as big as it was, because even in the original run, 7 seasons, but
Huge show.
to then go 20 years and come back to little to no fanfare, not much behind it. We'll talk about them more later, but the two main actors, Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt, they both went on to have other stuff go on, but in the last 10 years, not really. Not much has gone on with either of them. Probably
Paul
more than
Reiser
I was
not
waiting to
so
bring-
much.
I was going to bring up the Paul Reiser thing because I don't know if anybody remembers it. I didn't know when to throw it in there. But do you remember for a very short time, it was during the run of Parks and Rec towards the end, they gave Paul Reiser a show that was very much his version of Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it was sort of it's real life Paul Reiser.
I do kind of remember that.
Yeah, it only lasted 3 episodes. We watched every episode. We're like, this is really funny, but it's really bad. And that just disappeared.
Huh.
So I think NBC got cold feet where they were like, I don't know, maybe Paul Reiser's not bringing people in the way he was in 1994 or whatever. But I thought it was a good show.
Right out of the gate, I was surprised to see how good this show looks for being. I don't know if it was remastered. Maybe we're watching a remastered version. I'm sure we are actually.
92, did I say? 1992?
Yes, and
92,
for
yeah.
1992, I
Yeah.
mean, you see some shows from, even a few years after that, and it's just grainy and dark and doesn't look good. And
I
was
always find
really
that
good
fascinating.
quality.
When you think about the way that these shows are recorded, even the cameras they use, they're made to hold up. And
It's on
you go
film.
on some of these streaming sites, and it looks like they were recorded off, a VCR, and then they just took those recordings and then loaded those to the streaming service instead of the original mastered copies, which is always
Yeah.
kind of weird.
Prime example is not to tip our cap, but for our Thanksgiving episode, that show is in the 90s as well, and it looks like dog shit.
And
Well, I
that's
think the
probably
shows that
gonna
are
be
bigger,
product
though,
of how
they
it's
pay the
findable.
money to put them in HD for syndication and stuff, right? So
Right.
maybe they pull the good version from syndication versus just, what would have been on TV beforehand.
Well, I'm sure a lot of money went into it, not to get in too wild of a tangent, but The Office has those supersized episodes now that they put on Peacock. In season 1, they've completely remastered that to look like it's high HD, which was not how that was originally aired.
That
at
looks
all.
way better, yeah.
Yeah,
It looks-
season 1 was ugly.
Yeah, but if you
visually
watch those
speaking.
episodes now, it's almost bizarre to watch them because it
That is
feels and
interesting,
looks
yeah.
so different.
They can make they can remaster the shows. It's just a matter of if they want to put the investment.
You know what comes
Yeah.
to mind is Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs did not look good. It was very grainy and where did we watch that? Maybe
That was that was
Disney
Disney
Plus.
Plus.
Disney Plus.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
yeah. I just remember it looking like shit and I think it came out after this, didn't it?
No, it was 89.
No,
Oh,
it was
no, it
91,
wasn't.
I think.
Yeah, it was right around the same time. But I guess again,
But no matter
you get
what, we
into
can
it-
all agree that it looked better than Cavemen.
phenomenal, and we'll talk about that in episode 100. But
I'm gonna
Someday.
fight this.
Only on-
I don't think it deserves the 100 spot even a little bit.
I don't
But we'll
either.
discuss this later. That's
We'll give it
ridiculous
101
for the
or
We'll,
100.
100.
we'll,
or
we'll
something.
discuss it in 69 more episodes when we reach episode 100.
69.
Because we are at episode 31, I believe, right now. I think this is episode 31. We'll get into it now, but to go to how we normally start these things, Mad About You, who has and hasn't watched this show up until right now?
I've seen it. It was one of those shows I never sought out to watch though. It was always just on.
This was one of those on after a show I was already watching shows where you'd get the intro and then shut it off.
Parent show is what I was called this as a kid. It's a parent show. It's on in the background because your parents or somebody older is watching it. You weren't watching it on purpose, and it made no sense to you. You're rewatching this now. I can't imagine 7 to, was it 9 years or 8 years? So 7 to 15-year-old us would have understood, or this show would have worked for us.
I do remember having a thing for Helen Hunt though.
Ew.
In Tornado.
Well, yeah, she's
What's
only
the
like,
Twister? You mean? Yeah.
We'll get into it in a little bit, but she was only like 29 or 30 when this episode came out.
Wait, Ferg, did you just ew her? Is she on the list? Is she on the Ferg list?
After this episode, she's very much on the Ferg list.
Okay. She
So
just
we
did a
won't-
movie
yeah.
where she did a
Great.
nude scene that was very widely reported a couple years ago because everyone
So
was
we have the new Mr. Skin.
Well, I just remember it coming out in the news. I haven't seen it, but I remember it being a big deal because it was 45-year-old Helen Hunt does a nude scene or whatever.
She's 50 now and she doesn't look very good.
Well, in any event, we'll get
Jesus
it.
Christ.
The
I
only
don't
thing
know. I
wanna
haven't
say
seen her in a
about-
while, but I like older women. So.
I'm 35 and don't look very good, so no shame in her game.
So one thing about this thing, we did say, and you said it was like a parent show. I remember Mad About You because the show was huge in its run, but it's one of those shows that, again, doesn't have a lot of staying power with today's world. It just didn't last the test of time quite the same. But yeah, it wasn't meant for us. This first episode came out when we're like 6, 7 years old, or 5, 6 years old. So it's not, it's made for 30-year-old people, freshly married, like that young adult crowd. We didn't cater to that audience at that time. So it is a little bit more interesting to watch it now as adults, a little older than they are in this point. Probably not Paul Reiser's, probably right around our age right now from that
Yeah, I would
episode.
think so. I think it's
Didn't
probably
they
right around our age.
say
Yeah.
that they were our age?
Yeah, they
in
said we're
34?
Gordo's age. That's
Yeah.
early in the script. They looked at the camera and said, "We are your age now." But no,
Then
this
he got in his
um,
NASCAR and he drove away.
yeah, it's a different perspective. Looking back at it now versus a show that really wasn't tailored for us at that point in time, and the jokes aren't really catered to kids either. So it's very much for young adults. So it was good to watch it now. But I actually remember nothing about Mad About You from its original run, other than they were a couple. I remember no details at all. I don't know if you guys have
The
anything
only
that stuck.
thing I remembered was the actual cast.
Yeah.
But if you told me to name any scenes or significant episodes,
Right, she looks
I
pretty
couldn't
good.
tell you anything.
Yeah, can
I
you
will
see that
say
in my
the
glasses?
one thing I really remember from the show is the character Ira.
Yes,
And
I
he
was
comes in-
waiting
he's
for
not in this
him.
episode, so I was a
Yeah.
little thrown off by that.
Does
but that
he
weirdly
replace
stuck to me.
that goofy friend of his? Or
Yeah.
is that friend always on it?
No, he's later. I looked it up, and he comes in later. I think season 2 maybe.
Yeah, Ira is who I remember, and he had to have just been that character, that they ended up swapping out for. I don't even remember that guy's name. What was his
Jay,
name?
I think his name is.
Yeah, but they called him something else by his
Oh,
last
Friends?
name, I think.
It's Jay. I have my notes. Sorry, it's Jay Selby,
Selby, yeah.
Selby,
Selby,
is what they
yeah.
call him, yeah.
and he's only in it for the first season.
So opening scene, we see it was a bedroom, and we hear snoring, and you're looking at it from the perspective kind of off camera, and they start to pan down towards the bed, and that's when we see that the couple is Jamie and Paul are the names of the two people. Jamie's played by Helen Hunt. Paul is Paul Reiser. We see that Jamie is the one who's snoring, and Paul's sitting there, side of the bed, eyes wide open, can't sleep because of the snoring.
I call bullshit on this because they say they've been married for 5 months, but there's no way they met 5 months and 1 day ago. Like, this isn't the first time she's ever snored. Like, this is the kind of stuff that you're like, oh, my wife snores.
Well, they
Like,
didn't
you
like
shouldn't be this
present it
upset about
like
it this
he
late
was
into
shocked
it.
by it, right? It was keeping him up at the time. They didn't really present it like this is the first time this has ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he was a little aggressive on it, though, especially for how late it was in the morning. Like, their alarm clock is just about to go off. Like, just put your headphones on, man.
Yeah, because he was trying to like, first he gave her like a light slap, and then he's shaking her, and eventually just plugs her nose so she can't breathe and wakes up.
A little
I
aggressive.
have done that to you in hotel rooms.
Did it
Works
work the same
temporarily. It does, and then it stops.
I'm a snorer personally. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm a snorer, so like,
Jay
I'm with
is.
her.
I am.
I
but
know- I
it's
know
gotten,
for sure
it's gotten
Jay is.
better as my weight comes down a little bit. The snoring subsides a little. They kind of go hand in hand.
How
So
do you know you're not awake for your snoring?
I ask other people that I share beds with. I just shared a room with you guys not long ago, and
you were just drowned out by your brother who snores way worse now. So I don't know.
But I did think it was funny that when she woke up, she asked if she was snoring, and his initial response is, "What could possibly be in your nose that I don't have in mine?" It's like an interesting take on that.
This is the start of where Paul Reiser, and I like Paul Reiser, I'm not knocking him, but this is very much like, and I'm going to reference Seinfeld a lot in this, I'm sure. He is very much doing a like 70s Woody Allen impersonation through this entire episode. And the like, what possibly could be in your nose? It's not in my nose is such a Woody Allen line.
Yeah, that's kind of his brand of comedy too, though. That's just how Paul
Neurotic
Reiser
and-
is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing, I wrote down at one point that it's kind of like Seinfeld light, or it's Seinfeld if George got married and
No, it's in no way like Seinfeld. I don't get that
No,
vibe
I was
at
thinking
all.
the same thing. This is
I get very Seinfeld out
Seinfeld
of this.
if
I want
Seinfeld was
to-
terrible.
I wish we had like a S1E1 historian that can go through every episode and tell us how many times Joe has compared a show we were doing
This
to
is
Seinfeld.
the first time I truly agree with him, though. I was
Thank
getting
you.
such
It's a New York
Seinfeld show about
comedy
nothing
about-
vibes. Like,
Yeah, it's New York people in their 30s who are kind of neurotic, going through relationship issues. That's
Yeah, but I feel like it's a little more structured.
because Seinfeld is about the situation, and Mad About You is about the people. Like,
Yeah.
Well, we don't know that yet. That
it-
was episode 1.
Well, I mean, just by this episode alone, it's about the people in the story and not the weird situation they're in. They literally had dinner in this
No, the
episode.
situation.
Yeah.
This is about the situation. They fuck while their friends are in the other
Right,
room.
Hold on,
It's
hold on.
very
We're
much
skipping
about the
ahead
situation.
till late in the episode, but I would say Seinfeld does a little bit more based around when you look back at it in the history of that show. There's a lot of characters, like these really eccentric one-off characters that wouldn't even really work other than in their quick story arcs.
Like Richard
was-
Kind in this episode.
Dude,
Well,
I fucking
no, he
love Richard Kind.
I love Richard Kind.
I
He's one of the greatest actors
love
of all
Richard
time.
Kind. Yeah,
But I am
He's-
saying he's an eccentric character that would be on Seinfeld.
I know,
right?
you
That'd
didn't
be
really
different.
get-
He's like a secondary character for
you
a
didn't
TV
get
show that
full
could do, like,
Richard
multiple
Kind in
episodes.
this too. Like, if you remember, like Spin City Richard Kind and shit
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, like he's just such a hilarious goofball, and you didn't get that at all with
is
this.
he
And I was
just in
bummed.
this episode? Do we know?
I don't
I'm not
remember.
sure.
He's a cast member the whole way through.
Yeah, because I remember his wife always being there. I don't really remember him that much.
He comes back from what I remember, but I've only seen like sparingly episodes. But I do remember him being in later ones.
All right. Well, I want to close out this opening scene because now that she's up, she asks him to run the shower and make coffee.
The coffee.
And he
Yeah,
doesn't
they really
react. He's
pushed
trying
the
to
New York
pretend.
accent on this. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right, Berg.
He's trying to pretend that his eyes are shut, and then she just says that she thinks she's pregnant, and then he like rises right up, like eyes
Made me
wide
laugh.
open, and she's just like, "Just kidding," like make the coffee. I was curious about this. I know this is like a thing that I've heard in television and movies for years, but like the whole like running a bath and like that makes sense because it takes a little time to fill, but like run the shower for what? How long does it take the water to regulate temperature?
It's an old New York apartment.
old pipes.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
could
to
take a while.
warm up.
But like start it now, so in 5 minutes when I finally get in there, it's going to be warm. Would it?
Yeah,
would it
I
have
think with
taken
those
that long?
apartments for sure.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's more
also
just
in
a
the first
situation at the
episode
time.
of Seinfeld.
But they have no
Let's
connections.
continue.
But then yeah, now we get into the intro and the song starts. It's just kind of like this like little piano drum beat at first. The vocals kick in.
So, did
The
you
origins
know?
of the song are insane, by the way.
So, did you know that this show's theme song Final Frontier was composed by Paul Reiser and Don Was.
Oh, I did not know that, actually. That's actually a fun fact.
Do you know who Don
and
Was is?
No, I do not.
He was the bass player in the band Was Not Was. He's Don Was. And their big song was, "Everybody get on the floor. Everybody do the dinosaur."
Whoa, really?
No
Whoa,
shit, huh?
really?
Everybody walk the dinosaur.
That's a great
I'm
song.
sorry, I didn't remember the lyrics for it.
Yeah.
I apologize. But Don Was is the guy who wrote that song.
Ooh.
Oh, cool.
And then he
What an
composed
interesting
this
combo.
So they
Reiser.
were the composers of that song, and it was originally performed by Andrew Gold.
Do you know what he's
Who-
famous for?
No, I do not.
He wrote the song "Thank You for Being a Friend" from Golden Girls.
Huh.
Oh, okay.
Most
So a lot of
specifically-
weird stuff going on in the sitcom world in this song.
Oh, now I'm down this rabbit hole.
So
Why are
as
you on
you-
Wikipedia again
Yeah,
while we're
as you're
recording?
checking up
Why
on the
can't you
song,
do
I want to
research?
get let me get into
And
the
he's
intro as
reading
you're
it through a
reading this
braille
up.
machine.
So,
You're so slow.
so the thing is, so the song kicks in, then eventually the vocals, and I'll say, you guys were kind of going over the piano riff, as I first brought it up, and I feel like that piano is kind of iconic, but the rest of the song I thought sucked. I thought the vocals were terrible. Like they could have just had that piano piece and just it be a standalone, and like it really didn't need the full vocal treatment.
I also don't think that intro is as long as the show goes, right? I always remembered a shorter version of that.
I agree. Yeah,
That's
it's
just another one of
truncated
those,
on
yeah.
the
I'm
other
not sure
episodes.
because we're probably more familiar with that show and its syndication than its original
Yeah.
run too, so it's
Yeah.
tough to gauge.
I got a very Huey Lewis vibe from that song, by the way.
I can see that. That's a little like it's kind of like a jazzy version of a Huey Lewis song.
Yeah, and the only thing other than that song that's going on is it's just like it looks like these like candid photos of them through the city, like taken by a photographer, like these black and white like still shots.
And
It
they're
was
all on the
boring.
Lower East Side of Manhattan, and you'll notice that there are two very obvious things missing in every one of those photographs.
There you go. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been like 5 episodes since I've brought it up. I'm just saying.
Was it
It's been a while.
You would have thought, though, I'm not trying to be weird here, but I'm thinking if you're taking a bunch of pictures where I think they're at the New York Public Library, they're in Central Park, they're taking all these New York iconic photos, and it's weird that you don't see the World Trade Center in either.
Well,
or any of them.
they're not like showing off the skyline because it's
But they
not
do, though.
showcasing.
You don't
But
see
they
the
do.
Trade
They
Center.
show it across the river, and you don't see the Twin Towers at all.
I didn't
I
know the
actually
towers at all.
didn't
You
know
should.
that was New York because it didn't actually look like it was even trying to be New York.
It depends
I
on
thought it
what
was
river they're
Chicago.
on. I mean, you can
I
look
think
at
that's
New
the Hudson,
Jersey
because they're
across the
lower
water.
Manhattan.
But I think the point was to not. It wasn't to overly showcase the fact that they're in New York. It's definitely a big staple throughout the episode, but those images are more to just show them as a couple living in the city together.
I'm
just
just
trying to
saying, where was Paul
establish
Reiser that day?
Moving on. So we get to the next scene, and it's the exterior shot of the city. Again, we were just talking. It was clearly New York, just based on everything you saw before that. Zooms towards the window to cut you into the building. It's like that's a forever thing for almost any show, right? The exterior shot of the building to let you know where they're at. Nothing too crazy there. And now we see the two getting ready. They're kind of like in a hurry a bit, and she's just making some toast. He's just kind of checking the fridge and walking. He's just trying to look busy, like for the show. I don't think he was actually directed to do anything specific where she had like an actual task. And he says that they need to like hurry up so they can get to the they don't want all the non-sticky seats on the subway to get used up first. So
I've been on the New York City subway system plenty of times. There are no non-sticky seats. That's
Yeah.
a fool's errand, Paul Reiser.
And
Maybe
if
it
they-
was like, do you want the poo seats or the jizz seats?
I, I would
You
probably
have a-
just
it's a real two-faced scenario. Do I get the poo or the jizz?
you could just stand up if
you
those are
could.
your only options, yeah. And then I also thought, as far as that went, like, don't these trains run like every minute? If you get to the train and all the good seats are taken, just like wait, and there'll be another one like pretty soon.
Yeah, but the other one might be just as full. Because when I used to
Yeah.
commute to work every day on the train, if you tried to play that game, the same thing would happen. Another just as full train would come. You just get on and deal with it.
Right.
One of the good byproducts of the pandemic was I ride the train every single day, and they're not full anymore. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Like there's
know how you
always
do that.
seats. It's crazy.
And it seems like this part of the pandemic care has gone away, but for a while everything was like much cleaner. So when you did get on things like trains, they were spotless because they had people just
We're back to being
constantly
slobs
cleaning.
again.
Yeah,
We're
people are
back to
very
the
sloppy
sticky
again.
seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've maybe wrote it like 10 times during the pandemic, and each time I would just stand and just try not to touch anything the whole time. So like,
I
didn't even
sat
notice.
down. Fuck that. Like, I got my clothes on. I'm gonna take my clothes off when I get home, anyways. So
You just walk
No
through the
harm,
house,
no
take all your
foul.
clothes off as you walk.
I do. I do.
Matilda
Yeah, when I
starts
come in,
I'm
I
the
just
Mad About You theme song. Tell Matilda it's lasagna time.
He's just strutting naked. Do-do-do-do-do.
I would assume he probably put a new set of clothes on, not just strip off.
I have
of
home.
his,
I have
Yeah.
comfy
Just put
home
the hat
clothes.
and
I mean,
sunglasses.
I'm sorry. My home clothes don't have holes in
I was
the
gonna
arm.
say,
That's
wait,
what
Right,
I-
no, I mean, we did just cover your like home comfy clothes like a couple weeks back.
It is ventilation. I am very sweaty.
I mean, I'm wearing my
so you cut the
camo
holes in your
pants. I
shirts.
mean, if you guys really want to know, hold on, I'll show you. I actually in on top of my ridiculous outfit, my comfy home pants include camouflaged sweatpants.
I'm waiting for you to fall over.
I was
so
really
badly.
hoping you were gonna stand on the chair and fucking eat shit.
For those of you who can't see, I mean, because I can't guarantee what clips will make it on Instagram, which you can find at S1E1 Pod on Instagram, by the way. But to give you a quick description of Gordo as of right now, he's got looks like he has a trucker style hat on, some big shades, a shirt commemorating the world's biggest orange,
Largest orange.
The world's largest orange in Orlando,
and then,
Florida.
And then he's got his camouflage sweatpants on. And if you were to just look at his face, if for those of you familiar with the late great Dale Earnhardt Sr., he's looking
Dale
like
Dribble.
the Intimidator right now.
I
I love
tried.
this though because Gordon's like, these are my comfy. I'm inside the house clothes though. We're gonna finish this episode, and between editing and everything, he's gonna go outside to smoke a cigarette and walk right out into the real world dressed like that, and then make fun of
What, on
somebody
my
when
back
he comes
porch?
back in for looking insane. And it's just the best pot and kettle scenario ever.
I like that
What,
you're
my
wearing
back foot?
camo on the bottom, so no one's gonna see your bottom, but bright orange on the top.
He's going to see that
Well,
floating
because
orange
I
stuff.
You're dressed like a
I-
hunter right now.
yeah, because I take hunting safety seriously. You know,
the
safety is
concrete
number one
jungle.
priority.
That's how Joe's gonna die in Maine, just walking around in all black, getting hit with a buckshot.
Yeah, but it'll be in,
Weird reason.
it'll be in
That
the
deer
city.
was-
deer.
That deer was on a skateboard with a 12-pack of High Life, and I got him.
So
I'll
as they're
save the beer
going
on the way
through, as they're going through their morning routine, she also reminds them that they don't need to go and pick up the dry cleaning because she forgot to bring it in. And he's nervous because he's like, oh, so now it's in your office and people walk by there and they see it. And I don't know what he's worried about. He's worried about people stealing clothing. I think at one point he was worried about a man walking off with his pants or
He
something.
makes a comment of people seeing his unmentionables, but your underwear is not going to get dry cleaned,
yeah,
right?
who dry cleans their
also
underwear?
true, yeah.
Yeah,
And,
but
like,
they don't.
pants and shirts.
They live in an apartment in New York. They don't have a washer and dryer. They probably bring everything down
Right,
to get clean.
But she specifically mentioned the dry cleaning, which is usually a separate thing than just sending your laundry in. But yeah, either way.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
it's
they-
not like it's just out. It's not like she has her desk sitting there with just underwear and socks laying around. Like things would be in a bag.
No,
When
dry
I-
cleaning
This is
is-
when I noticed though a lot of like typical sitcom like role reversals in this one. Like usually the dude who's like snoring, she was the one who snored. It's usually
Yeah.
like the dude who's lazy and like misses chores, she missed it. It's
That's
usually
good
the
call.
dude that wants to have sex and the wife's like, no, not today, Al. Like
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
I
the
never thought of
beginning
that.
of that.
That's a good
And,
pull
like-
for her. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
definitely like the the reversed
She's like,
role
"Let's
of the
bang."
classic.
Because
sitcom.
yeah, you just got into it. And that's the very next thing that comes up is as he's talking about someone walking off with his pants, she just out of nowhere goes, "It doesn't bother you that we haven't had sex in 5 days?" And he just goes, "Hello." He just wasn't ready for that at all. And he's just
I'll
trying to
also
joke it
never
off.
not love someone responding to a sentence with
Hello.
hello. It's never not going to be funny.
Yeah.
He's joking it off and he's saying, "Well, we've been married 5 months, so that sexual part of the relationship's over now." And she's trying to figure out what's actually going on. I think she's like overthinking why it hasn't happened because it's only been 5 days. It's not like they haven't had sex in months or something like that.
I will say, starting to watch this episode, right? Like, I came into it with a bit of a bias from what I remember as a kid, right? And then as all this stuff started happening, you didn't do the chores, you're snoring, you didn't make the coffee, the sexual part of the relationship is over, it's been 5 months, like that kind of argument. This is where the scales for me started going like oh, oh, this is kid Joe and this is adult Joe, and things. I'm starting to get this show a little.
It's just a more
now.
relatable show. Yeah, as
Yeah,
you
it
get
becomes
older.
way more relatable.
Yeah, and I said that early on. The show was not made for us. So, and it's
No.
at the age we were at when the show came out, where now we're in our 30s. We are that crowd.
But I think a show like Seinfeld, which I don't know about you guys, but I watched new and watched in reruns when we were kids, and I got something out of it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. I still
think
can. I
not-
couldn't in this show, and now as an adult, I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, and to not keep going back and forth with Seinfeld, but I just, I
Why?
kind of talked about it earlier, but the thing with Seinfeld is there's so many cartoony like characters that come in and out of episodes that are going to be more appealing to a kid. They're not
Right.
made for
Yeah.
kids. They're not like straight up cartoons, but they're just such eccentric, wild characters that even if you don't relate to them, it's a funny, entertaining thing that you can stick to a little bit more than the neighbor or the best friend. Like that's when you're a kid, it's just not as relatable. The couple that you guys always hang out with but don't want to. That's not something you can connect with.
I think the biggest thing is the wanting to have plans versus not wanting to have plans. That's where, like, as a kid versus an adult, right? Because when you're a kid, you're like, I want to see everybody. I want to do everything.
Oh no, I am still that kid.
You still are, yeah.
I am. I
I
always
am
wanted to
the
be around
opposite.
people.
When there's an episode of this, or a scene in this episode where they're just like, what if we just cancel all our plans? We never leave the house and tell anybody. And I was like, oh my God, it's heaven. I never want to go anywhere or do anything ever again.
But yeah, he's just trying to diffuse her concerns, and he's just saying, hey, stuff happens. He's like, I had to edit one day, then you had the conference, and then my parents were over, which killed the mood, and then sucked the life out of me for the next day. So 5 days goes by quick. And I think at that point, it just seemed like the lack of physical connection that they had been having was kind of messing with their self-esteem a little bit. So now she's looking in the mirror, and she's like, is my head getting smaller? Like, I just think she needed that physical connection to feel more herself and feel good about herself. And that's where that was coming from. It was less about the marriage, I think, and more about how she felt about herself. Not to like overthink the situation, but
No, I think that's pretty spot on assessment. I mean, who doesn't want to feel that physical connection?
Right.
I mean, that's tied right to how your self-esteem. I mean,
I love you coming up with like a serious, important relationship comment, but looking the way you do right now. I like,
I
can't
know,
fucking
you're
handle it.
impossible to take seriously.
I
But
look
yeah.
good.
he's reassuring her, you're beautiful, and tonight let's have a night, just the two of us. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to have dinner and no other distractions. And then he tells her, we'll do dinner at 7, foreplay at 8:15. We'll be naked by 8:30, wheezing and sweating by 9.
That's a bold move because they want to have lasagna at 7 and foreplay at 8:15. They're our age.
That is ballsy. Yep.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
That is an
Yeah.
incorrect assessment of how that night is going to go.
Well, that was when she offered to make lasagna, and we'll get into it later because it actually does come up later in the episode, but he's like, you can make that? She's like, I can try. Like, she was excited at the idea. Like, I thought she was going to make this like from scratch lasagna. We will get into
It's
it later,
frozen
but it is,
lasagna,
it is very much not.
It's
That's
not
a
a
pretty
lasagna.
thick thing to
Firm
have in your
lasagna.
belly
Yeah.
for a
In that
45 minutes later, let's go to the Bone Town.
in that moment, it sounded like she was gonna like to prepare for this big night, cook this big dinner from scratch. But we later find out that is not the case. As they're making these plans, they realize they had already made plans with Fran and Mark, who are their couple that they do things with. Apparently, she's trying to kind of pin this on him that he should have remembered as well, because he had no idea that they had plans. And she's like, remember, like, I said, like, this week I had this going on, and then the next week we were going to be hanging out with them. And he immediately catches her like in this lie, because essentially it was she forgot to tell him and she was trying to cover. But he realized that the week that she would have told him, she wasn't in town. So there's no way that she actually had told him that.
I do love that scene. I love his detective work. Like, he can't let it go. He has to, like, detective down
Just
that
because
she
she was
lied
out
to
of
him.
town, like.
Well, it's different. I
I'm
mean,
like
nowadays
supposed
you
to
would
believe
send a
they
quick
didn't
text.
talk for a week. Like,
Well, times were a little different,
Pre-cell phone.
Yeah, pre-cell. So they probably got
Yeah,
had a
that's
quick
true.
phone call, maybe called from the hotel or whatever. But
early dial-up internet, they could have
But-
been aiming.
yeah, but
I
I
don't know
just
if they
don't
were
think.
aiming in 92. Maybe, though.
Yeah, but
We
even if they
were.
were catching up, it's unlikely that she was making plans with other people through
They could
that
have
AIM chat as
faxed
well.
each other. They could have beeped each other.
To
I love the
inform him
idea
of
of
plans,
three separate faxes that come in that say, like, I love you. And then three more, they're like, I love you, too.
Plans next week.
But yeah, he tells them just blow them off.
Breaking news:
She said
Todd
that they
stinks.
can't because they're always canceling. She's like, we're always canceling on them, and he's like, yeah, because we don't like them. Like that's it's just weird. Like how are you? You know, I guess there's probably people who do that. I just can't imagine a world at which I'm continuously hanging out with people I don't want to hang out with anymore. Like it's just I don't know. The world works different now, I guess, but there's just not enough time for that.
Well, I think it's different. I mean, I think you nailed that. The world is different. I mean, because now you can just text someone and be like, "Yo, sorry, something came up. I got the shit tonight." You know.
Yeah, it's more personal if you have to actually like face to face or give them a phone call
Yeah.
and come up with an excuse. When you
Yeah,
can
if
just
you
kind of
gotta
hide
call
behind
them-
your screen, it's so much easier to cancel
Oh,
something.
Exactly. But back then you couldn't really do that. You'd have to call them, and it's a whole big production for it.
Progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Canceling
that's a sign
plans
of
made
progress.
easy.
I can blow people off so much easier now. I don't have to see the hurt in their eyes when they don't get Ferg time.
Yes, that's exactly it. So now they finally rush out the door. Door shuts, door opens back up, and she rushes to the window because she needs to crack the window open for the dog. And he's like, "It's an apartment, not a Volvo." They leave again. Door opens back up a second time. Now he rushes back because in that quick second that they left, he realized, well, someone could try to sneak into the house and rob us. He's very concerned with people taking his stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because earlier it was the same thing with the laundry at her office. He thought someone's going to run off with his pants. Now he thinks someone's going to scale up the building. And from what we saw in the earlier exterior shot, I mean, they're quite a few stories up.
They say
So,
11.
Yeah, so it's unlikely that someone's going to scale the entire building just to
You
scale
could, climb,
something.
you could climb a fire escape. There was a fire escape window.
I guess, but that's a lofty.
11 stories on a fire escape is not a lot, though. 11 stories on a ladder, no one's doing that, but it's just a stairwell.
Yeah. But you
Yeah.
don't know, just because you see the windows cracked open, that doesn't mean one way or another
you
someone's
wouldn't,
home or
you wouldn't
not.
target it, yeah.
You wouldn't
No.
go all the way up there just assuming no one's home, because then
Right.
you can go all the way up there and then there's people sitting in the apartment. You're going to just walk right back down.
But
Oh, sorry.
later they show like he has like editing equipment or something like there, so he has expensive work shit.
Yeah,
so I can
and
see
'cause
him
he
being
talked about
concerned
editing
his
earlier.
Stuff.
Yeah, he's a documentary filmmaker. They don't really go into their careers so much in this episode, but he's a filmmaker. So he must have, and it's 1992, right? So
Yeah.
film equipment, actual film, or sort
Yeah.
of expensive video cameras, everything's worth way more money.
And then, so now for the second time, door opens and shuts. She comes in first. He comes in, and then as they're leaving this time, he's like, "Hurry up before I mess all your clothes up in the closet." Shuts the door, opens up again, and he's like, "That didn't mean I didn't like your outfit." So she took that as a comment about her clothing choices. So that's the end of that scene. I like the way that played. Visually, it worked really well.
I like the
It's
back and
weird
forth
they-
in and out of the house.
You think it's weird they opened the window for this pet that we never see in the episode?
We do at the very, very
We
end.
do at the very
At the end,
end.
you
Oh, I
see
Yeah.
must have missed it.
Yeah.
The friend is hugging him.
Yeah,
Jay's
when
on the
he's
floor
watching
with
TV.
him.
So now we get to the next scene. Again, establishing with the exterior shot, but they're right back at their apartment. Now, Jamie's talking to her sister, who I believe her name was Lisa. She's talking about how good they are for each other because they make time and their parents never did that. And while Jamie's getting ready, it seems as if the sister was originally under the assumption that she was staying for dinner or something, because she showed it to her. She's like, "Does this look good?" And she was like, "Oh," forget how she described it, but it was basically insinuated that Lisa was under the impression she could stay for dinner.
Now, this threw me off at the beginning because when I saw the credits roll for the show at the beginning, I see Anne Ramsey, which is this actress, right? She plays Lisa, the sister. That's Anne Ramsey with an A. But when I read it, I thought it was Anne Ramsey with an E, who is Mama Fratelli from The Goonies and Owen's mother from
I would have enjoyed this
Throw Mama
show
from the
much more
train.
if it was
It's wet, isn't it?
right, because I had never seen this show like the pilot before. I was like, oh my god, is one of their moms Owen?
Mrs. Fratelli.
But then, like, no offense to this Anne Ramsey, but I found out it was not Throw Mama from the Train Anne Ramsey. I was so bummed out.
What a
You don't
great
have a
movie.
cousin Larry. That's all I can think of.
It gets established. So now she realizes that she's kind of interfering with date night. But she kind of knew about date night because she was just talking about how nice it was that they make time for each other. And then she still thought that she was just going to crash dinner. But regardless, she's like, "I don't want to interfere with your date. I already have plans to wallow." And that's because she broke up with Arthur, who was described as the creep. And
Well, he does look like Willem Dafoe, which makes sense to that, right? Spider-Man.
Yes. Yeah, Willem Dafoe, not William Devane, who I was looking up both their credits. Obviously, I knew Willem Dafoe, and I even
I don't know who William Devane is.
If you looked him up, you would. I can't properly describe him, and I should have taken note of things. Like, I did it for myself, but didn't provide the notes so I'd be able to tell you what he's from. But you'll
Don't worry,
know his
Jeff
face.
Gordon's on Wikipedia as we speak. He'll figure
Yeah.
out for all of us. He's racing around the corner
Yeah.
to it.
He was in a lot. I'll tell you, as I read it, there wasn't like one standout thing that I could tell you, oh, he's from this, and you would
Just
immediately know what I meant. But
a
if you
busy
look up his
character
face,
actor.
yeah, you would know him. But also, while I was doing that, I checked up Willem Dafoe, and like in 1992, to be like, did he not look super creepy in 92? Like that this is a positive thing?
I think he was a handsome guy back then.
I don't know. Was
Nah, it really not so much.
Mississippi Burning era Willem Dafoe?
Oh, yeah, Smoking Hot. I don't know. I can't.
Oh, yeah,
You
I
probably
know
shouldn't
this
say
guy.
Smoking Hot about that movie.
Joe, didn't you know somebody who grew up with Willem Dafoe? I feel like
Nate's dad.
yeah, that's
grew
what
up
it
next
was.
to-
Yeah.
And whenever I see him, I always think of the one thing Nate's dad said, where he referred to him as Little
Willie
Billy
Defoe.
Dafoe. So for the past 20 years, whenever he shows up in anything, I'm like, Kelsey, look, it's Little Billy Dafoe. Like, I can't not say it.
And Gordo, I think you excitedly just figured out something that you might know the other actor from.
It looks like he had a very long career.
Yeah, and he's still alive, by the way.
What was his name?
His
William
name was
Devane.
William Devane. And he's best known for his role as Greg Summer on the primetime soap opera Knots Landing.
Knots Landing. That's what I know him from. Yeah.
And
I
he
was-
was James Heller on 24.
He was also in something I just watched recently, and I can't remember what it was. But
And
yeah,
I would
he's a very
encourage any of you
He's done a ton of
listening.
stuff.
Just Google the two if you want. William Devane, Willem Dafoe. Look at them both and decide which one you'd be more attracted to. That's all subjective. So whatever is more your style.
And if you say Willem Dafoe, I then tell you to watch the movie Antichrist, and then you will change your mind immediately.
Apparently, Arthur liked her too much to date because I guess he didn't want to get married again, and she said, "Well, you don't want to get married again either." So they both, had been divorced.
Aw.
So this whole liked her too much to date thing, I don't know. I guess it's as weird as it was, I kind of understood the sentiment and what was meant by that. Not that you agree one way or another, but he was out of divorce, out of a divorce, and now he likes Lisa, right? But he just doesn't feel that if they go a little too far along in the relationship that it complicates things. I don't know how to properly describe it, but I kind of understood the sentence.
He was just trying to get out of the relationship. It was it's not you, it's me kind of thing. 'Cause
It
she's
could be just
clearly
that.
a stage 5 clinger, and
Yeah.
I couldn't stand her the second I fucked.
It could have been that. I don't know. I just thought maybe, he's like, hey, I was married and now I just don't want that at this point in my life yet.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to just be that. And it was such a throwaway line that, again, I don't think it was written to be discussed the way we're discussing it now, but for the sake of the show, why not? Lisa says that Jamie married the perfect guy. And then kind of, Jamie's counter to that is she kind of does this impersonation of her husband at a restaurant debating, like, I'm thinking soup, but they only have bisque. I'm uneasy with bisque. I don't know why.
I
So
genuinely
this-
laughed through all of this. I
That was
found
a
this very
good,
funny.
yeah.
So this is the only time, like, that
Seinfeld
when-
here?
Yeah, that's the
Yep.
only time that I got kind of a Seinfeld vibe. That's a very Jerry.
Yeah, so
thing.
what
Bisque's
I'm-
not a soup!
the way,
Yeah.
Very Seinfeld.
the way
And
she
I don't
did
know
it,
how I feel about bisque is what
Yeah.
got me.
the way she like crunched her face and like held her hands up, and like it was a decent impression. And I just said, but is impression and impersonation the exact same thing, or is there like a nuance, like subtle difference between the two?
That's a good
I
question.
I don't
know.
think there's a difference. I
I'm
never
under the
thought of it
assumption
like
it's the
that.
same.
It's maybe like a potato scenario.
Yeah. But what I also really liked about this is even though it was a scene that she wasn't acting with Paul Reiser, I thought this showed a lot of good chemistry. Like it really like connected those two characters. So for a pilot episode, there was this feeling that like they are legitimately together. It's not like this forced hand.
We've talked about this in some other episodes before where like you think the cast maybe went and spent a weekend or a week or whatever with each other and became friends, right? Like
Yeah.
if the five of us went away and there were cameras rolling and we didn't know, they would just be us doing impressions of each other that were very spot on to each other because we know each other that long, right? So when people can do it who, like, they must know each other at least for a while, spent some time together.
Yeah, it really felt like she really understood him.
Maybe she was just a really big fan of My Two Dads, and she really got the nuances down.
Yeah,
She watched it every week.
She just watched it over and over again.
She's like, I love that show.
She drops this giant chunk of frozen lasagna. So we talked about it earlier. She was talking about making lasagna, and he's like, "Oh, you can make lasagna?" She's like, "I can try," but apparently what she meant was, "I have this frozen brick of lasagna in the freezer that I'm going to heat up, and that's going to be our date night food."
Has anybody here ever made a lasagna before? Because I make one every year for Thanksgiving. Maybe
It's
once.
difficult.
It's not easy. It's very hard.
No, yeah.
It's
You
like
know what
baking
always
a very
happens?
confusing cake.
When I make a lasagna, the thing that drives me the most insane is when you make the noodles for it, at least 3 of them stick to the pot for some reason. No matter how much salt or oil you put in the water, you end up just tearing one of those or a
I've
few of
gone
those.
no bake noodles now, man. You got to try it.
I will not do that, no.
I think it's worth the effort.
No bake noodles?
Yeah, they
Ooh,
make ones
lasagna's
now that you
hard.
don't. The cooking itself happens in the lasagna. You don't have to boil them first.
Oh, okay, all right. That's interesting.
I'll send you
So
some
I
stuff
wonder if
after.
they're just already cooked and freeze dried. That has to be what it is.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But that way, the only problem with that is because it's one giant sheet, you can never make it fit your actual pan. So you end up cutting a bunch of shards around it to fit the
Yeah,
spots.
yeah.
But it works, and it's way better than because, like you just said,
But you don't have to fully cook it, right? You just got to get a little, because it's going to bake in the pan with other wet things. I don't want to make this lasagna chat, but
right.
But
But now you can
itself
actually
to
buy
it?
lasagna noodles, and even like I buy gluten-free ones that do not need to be boiled. You can they're right from the thing. Like the cooking happens in the pan.
Yeah.
So during all this interaction, Paul eventually walks in, and he tells her how cute she is and gives her a kiss. And at this point, had no idea that Lisa was even in the room. So now he's kind of like scrambling to make like quick small talk because he's kind of surprised by her presence because he thought this was going to be this big night alone. And at first he's like, "Oh, how's like the guy?" and immediately gets slapped with this towel by Jamie. And so he switches topics because he picks up on what she's trying to tell him and switches to the car. And then the car, I guess someone stole the stereo and slashed the seats. And he's still trying to make the most of this conversation. Like, well, at least you have insurance.
Classic
And she-
90s New York too, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, they stole my stereo. Like now that would just never happen because your car comes with some whatever basic stereo. It means nothing unless you really want a sound system with big speakers in the back of your car. Like most people don't have that.
And the computer situation is much more complicated. It's not like
Right.
you just rip the box out anymore, but I'm sure it still happens. But
I mean, I remember my uncle living in Somerville when I was a kid, and he had a Jeep, and he got his, the non-hard top slit
Yeah, yeah.
5 times, and they stole his stereo, and they started making stereos that had like a handle in them. And you just took them out with you.
yeah,
Like when
Yeah.
you went home for the night, you pulled the whole stereo out because you were like, someone's gonna try to steal it.
Like a
which
plug
is
and
so
play, yeah.
crazy to think that we lived in a time for like a short period where it was like, yeah, it's a removable stereo. This is too much.
Yeah.
and what I thought was again, probably thinking too hard, but when he said, "Oh, at least you have insurance," she's like, "Oh, I forgot to send in the premium," and then in a way that kind of made her and her sister make sense as sisters because it looks like Jamie keeps forgetting to do simple chores too, so it just seemed like, oh yeah, you guys are definitely sisters. You have very like qualities.
Well, she got the pretty hair though.
So you did get the
Yeah,
pretty
I didn't
hair
really
at
pick
that
up
point.
on that, but it does track.
And then he's still trying to
Pretty
make the
hair.
most of it. And he's like, "Well, you got your health, right?" And then he just leaves the room. And then she just brings up that she got her period again. I guess she's getting like more than a typical cycle's worth of periods.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was her saying that she got her period twice or more frequently, or if she was like trying purposely to get pregnant, even though she's no longer with that guy, and that was like a bummer thing that she got her period. Like I couldn't tell where that was going.
I was under the impression it meant that she's getting periods more frequently than she's supposed to. And, I'm not going to pretend I know enough about the situation
Now, I
to
read
comment
that
further.
as it's just she's not really the passing of time is just not registering with her. Like, well, oh, it's already been a month, really.
Like she's just drifting, and
Yeah,
that's her
I
only
just,
way
I
to
just
market.
read
Oh.
that as he said, "At least you have your health," and she's saying, "No, I don't."
Well, I think that's what it meant to be. I thought it was a weird example.
It was
Like,
a
but-
very weird example that really
Yeah.
didn't fit, but I think that's what they were going for.
So now he's no longer in the room, and you just hear him shouting. It's like, "Oh, look what happened over here!" And then Jamie excuses herself and then heads into the living room to talk to Paul, who's sitting there and he's just shaking his legs in the chair, which I didn't quite understand why he was doing that.
I think he was talking about how the thing was too far from the chair.
Oh.
The
Well, we didn't
Ottoman.
even mention
The footrest
that,
was
did he?
moved.
The Ottoman was too far from the chair.
your feet up.
The Ottoman Empire.
So then he tells her that we were supposed to have foreplay in 11 minutes because of part of his divine plan from earlier. And now they start arguing about how this was supposed to just be their alone time, but it's my sister and she's depressed and, what she's supposed to do. And he's kind of like, she's always depressed. And he's saying, if this same exact thing happened with my friend
Love that
Selby,
line.
you'd
She's
be
always
going nuts.
depressed.
Yeah. He's like, if this was happening with my friend Selby, you'd be going nuts. And well, that's different because this is my sister and Selby's over the house every day. But now Paul picks up the phone and calls his friend Selby and just invites him over and to join them to have some lasagna, and adds like, is it vegetarian? Because he won't eat that. So
But I felt this fight went from like a 2 to a 10 really
I
quick.
agree. It
Yeah.
did. Also, I
Yeah.
guarantee you
Yeah.
that chair
Really.
cost $5,000. That was a really nice chair, and I want it.
Nice chair, yeah.
but I think
Nobody
that's
else
typical of
think
a
their
lot of,
foreplay routine is.
that's how, what?
Well, he's obviously very concerned. He cares more about the foreplay, I think, than the sex. So what is the
He
foreplay
made
for him?
foreplay was a very specific part of his plan,
Right.
early on. So,
And that could be different for everybody. I wonder what their foreplay routine is.
well, later
He
in the
just
episode, it
yells
doesn't look
four.
like there's much foreplay at all. Yeah.
I was gonna say it doesn't look like it
we'll get
They
into
lasts.
that
skip it
later on.
completely.
What if their foreplay is an epic fight?
Maybe.
Like
Oh, that's a good
they
point,
they
yeah.
need to hate each other.
We're
like,
watching
fuck.
it go down right now.
Yeah, we're
That
actually
sounds-
watching them have foreplay.
Yeah.
Good call.
And now that's where the episode gets relatable to me because I love to argue. So now,
So basically, what Jay is telling us right now is the episode of the Big Show that we did. Jay was sexually aroused the entire time because all you did was argue with us that entire episode.
I can no.
Well,
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, if you want to go back into the archives, we did an episode on The Big Show starring Paul White. That's in there. You can listen to that if you'd like.
And someday we'll release the 10 minutes where Jay just yelled at us in
Yeah,
between that to
yeah,
then
the
make
cutting
the
room floor. Me telling them all.
Guys, let's get back to the show.
Well, as much as it's the Big Show, I didn't want it to be the big long show and be 4 hours. But moving on from that, so we can continue to talk about Mad About You, they keep arguing, and it turns into this thing where he kind of like lets it be known, like, well, if you tell your sister to leave, I'll call Selby and tell him to not come. And he basically only invited him over as like leverage now. Like, this is going to happen unless you correct the situation. But as they're going back and forth, the doorbell rings because they completely forgot to cancel plans with Mark and Fran. So, and now they're arguing with one another about who was actually supposed to do that, which I don't think it was established who was supposed to
it was
call
never
her.
No.
established. Also, when they're arguing, there's no way the sister can't hear them. She's one room
Right.
over.
Well, that's established again later on, too.
Yeah. That,
yeah.
That's true.
So they're arguing all the way to the door, and then eventually open the door together, turn it off, and both give them both an excited like, "Hey!" And that's when we see the couple of Mark and Fran. And we already said Richard Kind plays Mark.
Richard Kind, the best ever.
So yeah, he is in a ton of stuff. Do we play the "Where do you best know him from" game? Like what
It
comes
has
to
to be
mind when you
Spin
see his
City
face?
for me. I'm sure if you'd said something, I'd be like, oh, yeah, but Spin City.
I would say probably the same for me. It'd be Spin City.
Clifford
Yeah.
for me.
A good one.
Daddy's gonna have a stroke.
Dale, Dale, can you think of anything that you remember Richard Kind from?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
He's in a million things. Curb Your Enthusiasm, he's great in.
Yeah, yeah.
He's in every TV show that's ever existed.
Yeah.
I think right
And
now
I'm
he's
sure.
he's the voice for some commercial now too, for some medicine.
Yeah. Doesn't he?
I can't remember which one it is. I heard the other day. I was like, "Is that Richard Kind?"
Is he one of the ones that like he plays almost like a booger monster or something like that? Is it one of those commercials?
Mucinex?
He might
Next?
be, yeah.
Is he? Yeah.
The booger monster. Richard Kind.
But what a hilarious dude.
I feel
Yeah.
like we're missing something big. And
I'm with you, and I'm
Follow
trying
Oh,
to.
with him.
I'm trying
For
to go
sure.
through it. I'll get back to you.
I'm
But,
doing the
um,
same.
So I want to talk about this. This only came up once in this episode, and it's something that happened in a lot of TV shows, and I think it just gets cut out of the streaming rights or it's not part of syndication in general. But we had this transition with the "We'll be right back," where it's just the two of them. It's the title screen. It's just the two of them talking over, and he's like, "I'll be
I
right
love
back."
this.
He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, we'll be right back." And it was such a thing that like I haven't seen something like that in years. Like I forgot what a thing that was in television. And it was just interesting to see that again.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love being like, "Hey, as a TV show, we're all part of this, right?" This isn't rocket science. It's a sitcom.
Yeah,
We'll be right
the
back.
old
Like,
just
I
like
love
we'll
that.
be right back after these messages type thing. Like you forgot that was like used in so many shows, and I like that they for this one. Amazon Prime, by the way, is where you can watch the show if you wanted to go ahead and watch it. Amazon
And
Prime.
the reboot.
Oh yeah, I do want to check out an episode to see how it looks 20 years later revisiting it. But yeah, I did like that was left in there. So from there we get back into the kitchen and it's just Jamie and Paul now, and she's attempting to flatten the lasagna because now she needs to
that
feed,
was really funny.
she needs to feed 6 people instead of 2. So she has this rolling pin and she's just smashing down the lasagna. And he does remind her like flat doesn't mean more.
I've done this with meatloaf before when I didn't think people were coming over and we were making meatloaf, and I was like, well, what if I just form it longer and skinnier? Like, it's not this, it's the same amount of food no matter what
Yeah.
you do.
And he's still kind of trying to diffuse a little bit. And he's telling her it's enough food, and he's explaining why. But he also does mention that, and because you're mad, you're not going to eat. And she's like, I'm not mad. So then Lisa walks in, and she's like, should I change? Because I didn't know you were going to have people over. And he's like, neither did we. And as I'm looking, her level of attire wasn't severely dressed up or down compared to the rest of them. So
She looks fine.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
kind
no,
of like
they all look fine.
it was
I
just
also
kind of
wanna
like
point out at this point, Lisa's the only one who was not invited over.
right. Actually,
Good
yeah.
call,
yeah.
So, I looked at that as they were just trying to get Lisa in because they're trying to get everyone into the kitchen one by one. So this is like the excuse for her, but it was kind of a poor excuse to get her into the kitchen because she wasn't dressed significantly different than them as far as like
No.
your attire matching the situation at least.
I wonder if the best friend ended up staying on the show. Were they like gonna set up like him and Lisa getting together?
I did get that same vibe because we'll talk about
Yeah.
his character in a second. We're about to meet him soon, but so now Fran walks in, and don't mind me, I just need some ice, and he says you can chip some off my wife's mood. It's like, well, that's not going to make things any better.
He's constantly poking the bear, which I kind of,
Yeah.
he doesn't back down.
But can anybody here say they've never, ever said something like that in a situation? The kind of comment
yeah.
like
Oh,
that,
for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
you
that's
know
how I am in
immediately
general.
after
Yeah,
you say it, you're in trouble and you shouldn't have said it. But there's that little tinge where you're like,
I
got him.
can't help myself in those moments. It's real tough unless like the person is showcasing that they are so mad that you're one comment away from like a complete breakdown, which even then with me, I'll still 50-50 that. But yeah, she as he says that, she does open the drawer and kind of whack him with the drawer a little bit.
Yeah. Like hit him in
It's a
the
little
crotch.
playful though. It's not like they're not at full catastrophic mode
And
yet.
it's not playful.
But
Well,
it's not nuclear meltdown yet, right?
Not
like
yet,
it's
not
not.
yet.
It's building. It's escalating.
But it is
but it's not
building.
like-
It's been like a slow
Yeah, yeah.
build from the second, Paul discovered Lisa was there. But now she's mad because there is no ice, and she asked Paul to do that. She says, the one thing I asked you to do. And I kept thinking, like, does that even check? Because originally the whole night was supposed to be them alone. And then up until the moment where people started showing up, they were together the whole day. So,
Maybe
like,
she
when did
asked
he
him-
get
Yeah,
ice?
they could have done all of that.
Maybe she
like-
asked him to get ice to chill their champagne.
Yeah, but, like, she was with him. She would have known if he left or not. There wasn't, like, a moment where...
She was also there when he was on the phone with what the hell? I can't remember this guy's name at all.
Selby?
Selby.
Shel
Yeah.
Selby.
She was also there when he was on the phone with her, and he didn't ask her to get ice.
Right.
Him to get ice.
So that's his thing, though. He says, that
Maybe
he
he
told
beeped
Selby
him
to get
too.
it, and then he runs out into the living room where Selby is. This is the first time we meet him. And he's having this, like, very uncomfortably close conversation with Mark. He's, like, hovering over him on the couch with a drink in his hand. And he's just like, how often do you cheat on Fran? And Mark is so deer in headlights in this moment. He's like, what? Like, you shouldn't ask that.
I know. I love how
Richard Kind
taken
would
aback
never
he
do
was.
that.
And-
Also,
and-
sorry, not to cut you off, but I was looking into Richard Kind because I was trying to see. He's been in a shitload of stuff, and I always like to compare numbers to Joe Pantoliano because Joe Pantoliano has also been in literally everything.
Joey Pants.
Who the
Yeah.
fuck is that?
You'd
You
know
would
him if
know
you
him
saw
in a
him. Just look him
heartbeat.
up. But Joe Pantoliano has been in 153 things
Oh, man.
as an actor. Richard Kind has been in 260.
Wow.
The dude
And that's
is
the
like
things that are
literally in
long-standing, like-
every show. Yeah.
Spin City's long-standing, right? A lot of movies. He's in a bunch of Curb episodes. He's in stuff for like
He's
big
a
arcs.
big voice actor and everything.
That
It's
guy.
just crazy how constantly this guy is working.
You should have said Cypher from The Matrix.
I could have said that. Or the guy from Memento. I feel like that's another big role.
Or one of the cast members from The Sopranos or The Fugitive.
As you guys are talking,
just The
I had no
Matrix.
idea who
He's
he
the
was
police chief in
until you
Bad
started
Boys.
talking
I
about
was
these
gonna
things.
say Bad Boys is
Oh.
number one. It
Midnight
literally
Run?
just popped up.
And he's not in this episode. So to go to go forward a little bit, you know, part of this uncomfortable conversation with Selby and Mark, he also asked Mark, "Oh, is your wife still with that transit cop?" Like, what, dude? What the fuck? Like, do you have like no social etiquette at all? You're asking like, do you cheat on your wife, and then are asking about some dude that's apparently she's cheating on him with.
Yeah, it seemed really weird because you also don't know their dynamic either.
Yeah, like they're not close, right?
Yeah,
They're just
you don't get that.
They just have a mutual friend.
Yeah, you don't get that they are close at all, or that they even know each other. So, or they
Yeah.
must be acquaintances because they have a mutual friend.
Does anybody ever
But-
drift in these scenarios where you think that like everything is one universe? Like he's like, oh, his wife, blah blah, blah, is she still with the transit cop? And I'm like, oh, around the same time would have been Money Train, so maybe she used to be married
No, not at all.
No,
to
that's
Wesley
not how my brain
Snipes,
works.
or
If
or,
only.
you know, and then that would make the guy who works at the train, Patton Oswalt, who is then best friends with Doug Heffernan from the crew. Like you can circle all this stuff around, right, guys? Right?
I don't. Sure.
And Janice from The
And then-
Sopranos is also in Money Train, who ends up dating Joe Pantoliano. Full circle.
Oh, okay. So now it all makes sense. Now that
Yeah, there it is.
That was the one link. Yeah,
There
all
it
comes
is.
Together now.
Joe and his beautiful mind.
Yeah. So, so Paul tells Selby as he walks in the room, he's like, "I told you to get ice and you forgot it in the cab." So now they walk in to the kitchen together, and they're like mid-routine now because you're like, "How could you forget ice in a cab?"
Who forgets
And
ice in
the-
a cab?
He's like, "Oh, well,"
say the same thing.
And he's-
It's so
and he's like,
Seinfeld.
he's like, "Oh, well, the driver had a little cooler up front, so I had him put it in the cooler to keep it, from melting." And she says that they're the Abbott and Costello of liars, and
That's the first genuine
timely
laugh
joke
I
there.
got.
the Abbott and Costello joke was the,
Yes, that was the
really?
first genuine laugh.
I love
got.
so much the cross section here where Ferg goes, how like what a real Ferg makes fun of it for being a joke from the 40s, and Gordon's like, the only time I laughed was the 40s joke. At the exact same time. That's so funny to me.
I don't know.
now-
I just thought that was funny.
So now we have Mark walking into the kitchen because he was the only one left at this point. He's the only one in the living room. And he's like, "Oh, looks like there's a party in here." And then Lisa's like, it's all typical banter. Why is it that everyone always congregates in the kitchen? And this is where it got incredibly uncomfortable because Paul replies with, "Because nobody wants to say, 'Get out so I can fight with my spouse in private.'" I was like, well, this is incredibly awkward.
It's very
but
direct.
Yeah.
though. I appreciated it.
I
It
know
was
that
an odd
everything's been
turn, though. I
building.
didn't see that from this
It was
show.
like dark. It was like too dark for the scene. It was just a little out of nowhere.
Very
Does everybody else
direct.
feel the same way about this? This is one of those other scenes where I was like, as a kid, I didn't get it, but as an adult, I'm like, you can't go to anybody's house. They're having a party. They're doing anything. Everyone's in the kitchen always.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's 100% true.
Like that's
I just
such
thought
a
the
thing where you're
way-
like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that as a kid. But as an adult, you're like,
You know
oh,
why
yeah,
it is,
I only
though?
want to be in the kitchen.
And I'll tell you why I think it is because at parties, people like to stand, and the kitchen is really the only room it's acceptable to just be standing in.
Yeah,
You know,
shouldn't
the
be sitting
dining room
there.
has chairs, you want to sit. The living room has the couches, you want to sit. And it's weird if you're standing. So if people want to stand and have a conversation, the kitchen is the room that makes the most sense.
Well, what
Also
happens too
snacks
is
in
like,
there.
Yeah,
well,
food
the
and alcohol,
spillover.
food and drinks in general are social too, and that's where they are.
Yeah, that too. Yep.
depending on how many people are there, like let's think logistically, like there's 6 people that are at their house right now, when you include the 2 of them. So now, how do you sit 6 people comfortably? Like you have the couch and maybe a chair next to it. So now you have to drag up a couple folding chairs. It's just it doesn't make sense. Like people kind of end up getting crowded just to all sit down.
I was going to say it depends on how many people are there as to how many people sit.
I should have paid better attention, but I didn't get a good look at their like dining room table.
Yeah, well, there wasn't
So,
until
like,
they set up a table later. There was no point that they were all sitting like
No.
casually. It wasn't until dinner itself.
Until
Not
the end,
all
you
of
notice
them
how
sat
big that
there.
apartment is. You can't tell until the very end. At the very end, you're like, oh, that must be rent controlled because that apartment now would be.
Oh,
like, it's
yeah.
a friend's
it was
apartment.
definitely
Yeah,
a
it was a good
sitcom.
size.
That is $1
fucking-
million at least
Yeah,
apartment
yeah.
now.
Oh,
yeah.
easily.
But 92, probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after Paul's awkward statement, Lisa and Selby kind of are picking up on what's going on, and they find excuses to just grab things and like bring them out. And Mark and Fran are a little more oblivious to the situation. They're still there. So Paul hands Mark like those. What are they called? It's just like the burner
grates.
covers on what is
Oven
it?
grates, yeah.
Oven grates. Yeah. He hands him 2 oven grates, and he's like, "Here, bring these into the living room."
I like the response. It was like, he'll know where these go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's afterwards. That's when Fran because Fran walks over with a bag of peppers or something. I can't remember exactly what it was to help with dinner. They ask her like flat out to step out for a second, and she still doesn't get what's going on, or doesn't like she's not reading the situation well enough because she asks if she can help, and Paul then grabs the other 2 and hands them to her and says, "Bring these to Mark. He'll know where these go." So it's like in that moment, what planet is this woman from?
Yeah,
she's-
that was. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's not catching on to any of this at this point.
She's very naive. Like I was half expecting a line that she moved in from like the Midwest to be with us, like to be with them or something like that. But like, she doesn't pick up on any social cues.
Well,
she's
first
not a
it
city
starts
person.
where he says what he says. A couple of them leave. Then they flat out tell her to leave. She doesn't leave. Then it becomes like bring these oven grates over to your husband, and she's like, oh, he'll know it. Like, so now you're just dumb, like because she didn't play
Yeah.
dumb up until then.
Maybe she's playing dumb and she's afraid that their fight's going to escalate. And
I think
he'll
some
come
of
out
it-
with a black eye.
I think there's just a couple examples where it was like the clothes thing with Lisa. They're just trying to get people in and out of the rooms at certain points, and they were maybe just a little lazy with the writing a couple of times with that stuff.
It's weird to me because, again, in this situation, it's best to use everyone in the room, right? Where, like, if I was having a fight with my wife and any one of you were in the room,
How wife?
my wife, I would look to any one of you and be like, this is bad. Can you just leave the room for a second? Like, there's no dancing around it needed. They're your
Yeah.
friends and your family. You just go like, or you give a look. I feel like she could have,
No,
Helen Hunt
and-
could have given her sister this
A,
look.
a wide-eyed like look to a friend. Like
The point
is
is
very universal.
they're not
everyone
picking
knows.
up. They're not picking up. We would all have
Yeah.
also picked up on that. If
That's
you
true
and
too, yeah.
your wife are screaming at
Which
each other,
the
they'll be
next
like,
scene
"Yeah, okay."
is very important to nobody picking up on cues.
It would have been
Right.
a way
Yeah.
better plot point if they just staged the whole fight to get them all to leave so they could bang.
Yeah. Well, I like what comes up next
It's on
though,
purpose.
because they're finally like alone in the kitchen, and they're arguing a little bit more, and they're just all this frustration's built up to this point, and she's just like, "This is not how marriage is supposed to be," and he's like, "Says who?" And she thinks everyone, and he's like, "Well, everyone's wrong. This is what it is. It's just like this. This is marriage." And then she said, "Says who?" I'm like, everyone. I asked around.
Yeah, I like this.
And
He
he's
always
like,
has an answer like that. That's
yeah,
one thing I like.
and his delivery
I really
was really,
enjoy Paul
was really
Reiser in
positive.
this.
Yeah, he was really good in this. He said, "There's always going to be stuff. I put up with your crap, and you're going to put up with my crap, and that's just marriage." And she's like, "Is that marriage?" He's like, "This is what I'm thinking. Like, this is basically from what I'm experiencing so far. That seems to be what marriage is."
I mean, I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah,
What I love about this scene, though, is that it sort of breaks down the TV A to Z of how these things usually are, right? Like, when she's like, is this marriage? And he's like, I guess so, because we're married, and this is
Yeah.
what's happening.
right.
It's not just on sitcom X, Y, and Z. It's how it always is.
And
He's
you know
just
what I
being
think-
like, this is our life now.
I think a lot
Yeah,
of
so.
shows in this moment, especially the more modern ones, would sneak in a really dumb joke, like right in that spot. This one, and Paul Reiser has a very like nonstop type style of comedy too. Like he's always like punching in jokes, but they did a good job there of knowing that scene needed to just be regular. Like you didn't need to put that little button on it, which I thought was good right there.
Yeah, they let it breathe really well there. The writing did.
And
But
then when
I-
he kisses her and she goes, more, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
They eased it right down the hill perfectly into like a real relationship scenario.
Yeah, because right before that, first there was a strange line that comes up where You know, it's like, you know, if we keep this up, I'm going to die. I'm either going to burst into flames or I'm going to strangle you. And I'm like, okay, that's
So much passion.
yeah, you know, one way or another, both very extreme. I don't think he's just going to combust. A little bit of an odd statement there, but
Oh, he's gonna combust. All right.
but yeah, this is where leading into
Vroom,
what Joe
vroom.
just mentioned earlier, because it's like, what do you want? It's like, I just want to be married to you. What if this lasagna sucks? And he's like, well, what if it doesn't? And what if? And that's when he just like enough, and he just grabs her and just goes in for a very hard direct kiss and pulls away. And I did, you know, you said it before, so he just goes more when he pulls away. And I thought that delivery was just, it was good.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's insanely
Yeah.
real. Like
Yeah,
it's so
it was
perfectly
a good
real.
moment. Yeah.
They didn't try to cheese it or goof it up.
Yeah. And that's
You
just
know.
like
They
what I
wait for
said
that for the
earlier.
last
There's
Yeah.
points in times where you have to be confident in your comedy enough to know you don't have to tell a joke every 4 seconds. It doesn't have to be joke, 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 joke. If the jokes within the episode are good, you don't have to joke nonstop. You can have serious moments woven within it that carry the story and make it a little bit more believable.
Yeah, it makes the jokes much better, right? You can't just have, like you said, it can't be boom, boom, boom. When you have seriousness or things that seem real, it makes the jokes seem more funny. So even when he's making Ottoman Empire jokes,
Yeah.
when it's followed up by the more thing was the one thing that got me this whole episode where I like was kind of like socked in the stomach where I was like, oh, this just got like really real.
Yeah.
That I wasn't expecting it.
Because after the more comment, that's when they just start full on making out at this point.
But
And
then
she's like,
great, then go into a huge joke, right?
Yeah.
The writing's really great here.
Because then because as they're kissing, it's like, well, there's people out there, and it's like we got enough chips to keep them occupied. And then she transitions over to like that little island in the middle of the kitchen, and now it's like, oh no, she's not looking to just kiss anymore. And that's when he's like, there's people out there. So she opens the door and tells everyone to not come to the kitchen for a while, and because there's going to be a big surprise, and just runs back in, hops right on that island.
You could say that they're baking a pie in there.
Sure.
Take another lap there, bud.
This is pretty R-rated for this.
Yeah.
Surprisingly
Yeah.
R-rated, yeah.
Yeah, real R-rated in her long dress. Like, hey, what's up?
And after that, so now we know what's about to happen in the kitchen. So we cut over back outside of the apartment. Mark and Selby are talking, and Mark's just like he's like a child. He's just very curious about the surprise. You know, Selby's like, oh, he told me what it is, but I just can't tell you. It's like, oh, I know what the surprise is. I just can't tell you. He's like, who told you? Did Paul tell you? You know, so now we're going to cut back to the kitchen, and it's just the shot of the bottom half of the island that she was sitting on. And now it's, you know, it's shaking. So we know what's going on. You're getting the dialogue as you see the shaking. And it's, you know, does this make me a bad hostess? What if Fran walks in? And, you know, he's saying, you know, Fran's the last image I need in my head right now. And we get the
colander hitting the oven, I think, was the funniest part of this whole
Yeah.
thing. That really got me.
So in this part of it, we have the box of Wheat Thins. I believe it was Wheat Thins fall to the ground. What a waste, because I love Wheat Thins.
I'm just glad there weren't Cheez-Its.
But yeah, terrible waste for a delicious snack. And now, so Lisa's setting up the table. We cut back outside, and it's her and Fran. And Fran's like, oh, you know, this kind of thing is actually more common because they're still reflecting on the fight. And she's like, you know, you get worked up in these situations. It's stressful having people. And she talked about how she once cried over a gravy boat. And at this point, I don't know what's going on, but as they're talking, I can't even pay attention because Selby's in the back just doing laps on a bicycle.
Just circling
He
the room.
falls over.
Yeah, right?
And I'm like, what's going on? Like, it's just this like low key thing that's happening that it's not addressed at first, but yeah, eventually we get to the point where you see him fall to the ground. But
Imagine having an apartment so big in New
Thank
York
you.
City that you can just ride your bicycle around it. Like
That's
I've seen
how-
apartments
that's
in New
why I
York City
noticed
that
it.
you couldn't fit a bicycle in, and this guy's
Yeah, I
just
know, right?
riding it around. It was crazy.
I think we all know people who live in New York who've had apartments where they had bicycles on the wall and you had to turn sideways to get through the
Oh, yeah.
hallway
Yeah.
Yep.
and not hit the bicycle. And this dude's doing fucking circles in it like he's Dale Earnhardt Gordo
Well,
over there.
you know, like they were filming that scene and they were like, just do something in the background. And he looked up and saw a prop bike and he hopped on. Like,
he actually had the bike in hand the scene before when he's talking to Selby about the surprise. So we cut back to the kitchen again, and now we see the stove, and it's just like I thought this was a little corny, the way they were doing it this time. I thought the rocking of the island and seeing things fall kind of made sense, but the things just being thrown onto the to the stove seemed like a
loved it.
little out of place, like a
So-
shoe. Like,
So my whole problem with this, right, is that you have a bunch of friends who are outside thinking that you and your wife are fighting
I
inside
was
of a,
thinking the
a
same
room,
thing, by the way.
and all of a sudden you hear shit being thrown around. You
Yeah.
don't know if there's like some like serious domestic, and then you're hearing, I'm assuming, some kind of moaning. I don't think that they're hearing like, you know what I mean?
there could potentially be a murder going on in the room.
That's
next
what I'm
door.
saying. There
Fran,
could be,
Fran should have thought they were fighting because she's like the innocent one.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. But like I said, me personally, that's what I would think is going on if leading up to this situation, because you don't know that they made up. All you know is that they're fighting, and then you just hear shit being thrown around the room. I'd be busting right in there.
So, well, he's busting right in there.
Hey,
So, yeah, we cut back again now that everyone's sitting at the table, with the exception of them.
Paul's a
And-
riser.
At this point, it sounds like
Helen
Lisa and Selby seem to be
I was
aware of what's
thinking
going
it.
on.
more like
Sorry.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
I was gonna say Helen cunt.
I was
Beat me
thinking
to
it too, and Joe did it.
Oh, Joe said it out loud.
We can edit that out.
So we get back into the living room area where everyone's sitting waiting for dinner, and it seems clear at this point that, to kind of go to what you're saying earlier, where they're hearing noises, it sounds like Selby and Lisa are aware of what's happening at this point. I think they heard enough to know that it's not a fight, but they know what they are doing.
Yeah.
But Fran and Mark, they're just a more oblivious couple, right? So Fran's about to head in to see if everything's okay, but gets stopped by Lisa. So I think that's the confirmation that Lisa knows what's happening at this point. And also, Fran just thought that maybe they were making her a birthday cake. Like that's what all this commotion is.
I always bang pans, and
Yeah.
there's always a loud commotion when I make a cake.
Yeah, so now we cut back to the kitchen again, and the timer goes off. Like they had like this egg timer going on, and they're kissing, and it looks like the deed has been done. They've completed the task.
You could say that the eggs were done.
Stop.
Okay.
What?
What the fuck does that mean?
Please elaborate, Gordo.
The eggs, that's how. What the fuck do you mean elaborate?
They're done.
You fertilize eggs is how you make a baby. Your eggs are done. The timer went off. Your eggs are done.
That's not how. That's not, you wouldn't
No
be
one's
like.
ever said that ever.
So-
they have.
Even though yes, technically eggs in a way are a part of the
I can't
that
even
process. You
I'm
wouldn't be
crying
like
and I can't even do this.
You
'cause
wouldn't. You wouldn't then be like, "Are your eggs done now?" Like that's not how that happens.
Hey, baby.
Oh, you made a pound cake. Like your eggs are done.
So in any event, the timer goes off, and then Paul comments about how usually like speed isn't like a good quality in this activity, but she also adds that this is the most fun they've ever had with Mark and Fran over. So like, do they fucking hate these two people? By the way, like they were
Apparently,
arguing
yeah.
earlier.
I get that.
I mean, I
vibe.
just met them and I hate them.
And the funny thing is if you were to really just put both sets of couples in a room, Paul and
Jamie.
Amy? Jamie are easily the less likable couple.
Well,
You get to experience
probably
Paul
have
and
more
Jamie
fun-
more, obviously.
I'd
But
probably
like,
have more fun hanging around with those two than I would with like Mark and Fran.
I don't know. I think I just really want to hang out with Richard Kind.
That's probably
I'm with
what's
you, but I
going
want
on there.
Paul Reiser there too. Like I wanted to be like
Yeah, wouldn't
girls
mind that.
hang out, and we'll like the fellas will go to the bar.
From there, we just cut to the next scene is after it's the end of the night. We've skipped ahead. We've skipped through dinner.
You know what I'm curious about? Not to cut you off, but after all that, and they came in and said, "We got a surprise." How did they come in empty-handed with no surprise?
Well, we did. What I'm saying here is like we flashed through all that, so it doesn't. We don't. It's not that it's left unsaid. It's just we didn't see that part of the evening. So all of dinner was skipped by as far as the viewer goes. So we get to this new scene. It's them, everyone's getting ready to leave. So Fran and Mark are putting their jackets on, and Paul and Jamie now are clearly in much better spirits. So there's a little bit of PDA going on. His arms are around her and stuff. And Mark starts talking about this cruise that they're going to go on and invites them to come. And he's like, oh, it'd be nice to have company. I thought the way he worded it wasn't bad, so her reaction didn't fit what was
weird.
said. Because she was like all, like offended as if he said it would be nice to have company, like as if he was going alone and wasn't including her. But that, I forget the specific wording, but it wasn't set up that way, so it didn't read that way. In any event, she's upset, so now he's trying to like backpedal a little bit. She's like, you always get us into these things, and tells him, she tells the Jamie and Paul, like, no, we're going alone. But during that, there was this part where I like this because this goes back to the chemistry between Jamie and Paul, or more specifically, Paul and Helen, like the actual actors. They're kind of like riffing off of Mark now because Mark's nervous because Fran's mad at the invite. He's like, oh, they probably can't make it on short notice anyways, and it was like, oh no, we can make it. We can clear our schedule. They're just very much now on the same page. So I thought that read really well with the two of them.
Yeah.
They just, they were able to joke together.
The one thing I noticed too is they were really like nervous, and like neither of them wanted to tell them, hey, don't come to dinner. Like we want to have a night together.
Yep.
They refused to cancel. She had no problem telling them they can't.
Yeah,
come.
yeah. I thought the
it
same
was so
thing.
quick.
Which is a more normal.
Yeah.
In that way, she's like, you guys are not coming to this cruise. It is the two of us. And then as they're also getting ready to leave, we see Lisa also is taking off, and she's going to take the subway. Fran was trying to like offer. I don't know if Fran offered them a ride or said take a cab.
No,
She
she's going
said
to pay
she
for
just put her in a
taxi.
cab.
Yeah. So why not
I think
just
you get
drive
the impression,
drive her
like a
home?
lot of these shows, that like nobody has a car.
Yeah, like
'Cause
New
it's,
York.
it's midtown or downtown, like lower Manhattan. No one really can. Where are you going to park your car? So everyone just kind of cabs.
Yeah.
Or
What a
subway.
terrible way to live, by the way.
But well,
Honestly, I couldn't do it. Yeah.
I think it's whatever you grow up being more used to, or you just whatever your situation is. That's not how we've had to live, so it's just less complicated. I mean, listen, Gordo and Joe, you guys have done a lot of commuting, more so than like me, Nick, and Ferg. We were driving everywhere all the time. You guys are taking trains constantly.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been taking the bus and train for 6 years. I am lucky though because I only have to do Blue Line 5 stops and that's it. I'm done.
It's one
Like,
train, yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
so I'm not really commuting in that sense. There's people have to switch fucking 3 times and take another bus after that every single day. And
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just more
Done that.
common, especially in New York.
When I lived in Winthrop and I was working in Harvard Square, it was a bus, 3 trains,
Yeah.
work, and then reverse
Walk.
that, and it drags on you.
Were you blue,
Yeah.
green, red?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say this too, though. If you live in New York at any point, really, like, but where this show is set, if they had cars instead and weren't taking public transit, parking is such a nightmare that you would rather
Yeah.
just deal with the subway. Parking is
I mean-
terrible. You have to switch what side of the street you're on at all times. You can't just leave a car parked like through the night. It's just too much of a headache.
In a place like New York, though, where there's so much around, unless you're going someplace specific like work, you just walk everywhere. Because if you need to get groceries, you want to get dinner, you want to go to a bar, whatever, there's so much stuff around you. You can
that's true,
walk
too.
close to your house and do it without being on a train or a bus, right? It's just the specific places you're trying to get to, work, or you're going to a concert, or you're going to a whatever, that you have to actually get on the subway. But most of that stuff you just walk to.
Well, I was
That's why
gonna
neighborhood
say-
bars and stuff and neighborhood restaurants always thrive. Like, Archie Bunker going to his neighborhood bar in 1972, right? It's because that's the type of neighborhood everyone lived in there.
Yeah, and I mean, New York is set up that way, whereas I feel like where we live in Boston, it's not set up that way.
unless you're in the main city, everyth's spaced out. where
But
you
even
need
in
a
the,
driver.
I
Even
am in the
then, though,
main
yeah,
city.
Boston's
I
weirdly
am in the
set
main
up.
city. I have one. I do have a supermarket near me, but it's a smaller supermarket, so it doesn't have as much offerings as like a
Right.
bigger one in the suburbs do. So
Yeah, but for that stuff, you make a pilgrimage, right? Like when I was
Yeah,
living
exactly.
downtown up until last year or whatever, there was a couple bars I liked near me I could walk to, 2 grocery stores I could walk to, 2 liquor stores I could walk to, 5 convenience stores I could walk to. You can do most of your week without getting on a train.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. And in this case, actually, to go back, Lisa does not want the cab. She actually prefers the subway because she feels like that's how she might meet someone because she can't meet anyone on a cab.
Pre-Tinder.
You could meet
Yeah.
a nice cab driver.
Yeah, the cab driver could be charming.
Yeah, you never know. That seems
So-
to be a little shady thrown on the cab driver there.
So the door shuts and now, the couple's left alone. But they're not because they turn over and Selby's on the floor. And this is actually, Ferg, is when you see the dog. Selby's laying on the floor, like cuddled up with the dog watching television. Helen tries to be subtle, but he's not picking up on it. She's talking. She's like, "Oh, it's 11:15." He's like, "All right, well, good night." So she just heads over to bed. And then when she gets to her room, Paul's a little bit more direct. He's not aggressive with her, but he just basically throws the coat on him to be like, "Yeah, it's time to go."
Yeah.
I love too his comment where he's like, "How do they not know he's Superman? They're reporters." And just
Yeah.
a good point.
Yeah.
So they're making a little bit of small talk, and they're walking to the door, and he's telling them about his plans for like the next day. He has like a date lined up with someone. He's like, and she's got a sister, and it's like, like the guy's wife's like in the next room over, and you're trying to say, "Hey, come out with me," and like the set of sisters, and like go on a double date.
I still don't know
Yeah.
at this point if he's like serious or that he's just like making poor jokes.
I don't
I
know.
think he's just a bad actor.
I know. I think if you look at like your first interaction with him in the episode is him asking Mark about like if he cheats on his
Yeah.
wife. So I think he's
You get
playing
that
that
he's like a
generic
playboy.
scummy guy like friend. Like that's kind of just the role they have him put in. But
Yeah.
they're going through the plans, and he's like, "I'm not interested." And I think Helen calls him to bed at this point, and he's like, there was a comment made about it, and Paul's basically saying, one day you're going to like hearing things like that, and you're going to handle it the way I'm handling it. And pretty much just shuts the door on his face, like not in an aggressive way, but just kind of be like, good night, and, leaves him off into his world. Ending off where we cut to them just laying in bed now. And she's laying down, playing with his chest hair, like comments about how she likes chest hair. And she says, "I think my sister knew," referencing to them having sex in the kitchen earlier. And he says, "I think Selby knew too." She's like, "How?" He's like, "Well, because I told him." And they have this little
Yeah.
conversation there about, how do you not tell your friend when you do something like that?
I love the line too when she's like, "I love your chest hair." He's like, "Yeah, what you've got's pretty good too, though." That's such a
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
great and kind of like, oh wow, I didn't
Yeah.
expect that joke.
So at this point, she's not really worried that the magic's gone. And, he says, "I'm afraid you might be, running out of things to worry about." And, they're still kissing and they exchange "I love yous." And she lays back next to him. And after about a moment of just being relaxed, she asks, "Are we having Thanksgiving this year with your parents or with mine?" She just couldn't, she couldn't stay relaxed long enough and not worry about things. But he replies, "But I think we're going to just visit you in the institution." And that's where that's the close of the episode. That was the last thing that happened.
A good, great close. Start and end in the bed, which I really love when they bookend those episodes.
Yeah, and the
everyone
joke was
who's in a
not too
relationship,
crazy.
Holidays are an understandable thing. Whose
Yeah.
parents are we going to? How stressful is this going to be? Like they perfect notes.
Yeah,
I mean,
And-
Joe, you're a man that loves Thanksgiving.
And that's why I host it every year and I solve that problem.
It takes him a week to set up.
It's a very
There's-
long
No,
setup.
longer than a week. I mean, he starts at Columbus Day, right?
Well, yeah, I
That's
got
the-
I got a vacuum, I got a heat clean, and then I got lots of turkeys and hams to cook.
Gotta get all the slush stains
Lots
out.
of turkeys. How many turkeys do you cook?
To be fair, I don't even eat the turkey. I care about
Yeah.
the ham. I don't know how many
Alright.
turkeys there are. I don't even eat it.
I don't want to get into a long tangent about Thanksgiving because we.
Save it
nearing
for
the end here.
Thanksgiving.
But I will say, yeah. You know what? Yeah, you're right, guys. This is our this episode starts in November. We just exited our for Halloween for October, so we're in November now. A few weeks later, towards the end of this month, we're gonna have a special television show that we're gonna be covering for Thanksgiving specifically. So we'll get into our Thanksgiving routine.
We'll go deep there, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I will cut that off there.
It's like
So,
Paul Reiser
um,
went deep.
What any
Cooking
comments on the
those
show
eggs.
before we go ahead with the green lighting and cancel? Anything else you want to say about this show? Anything you guys want to get into?
I'm good.
Nope.
I wish I had an ottoman.
So the only thing that I wanted to bring up, other than we've already covered at the top of the episode how it had one final season 20 years later where they brought the cast back, and the only other thing I really wanted to note about the show that I thought was kind of interesting is actually the show's been adapted in other countries. So like I think in 2004 we had a Chilean version. Argentina had a version that came up in 2016. In 1997, there was a British adaptation. And in 2016, there was a Chinese adaptation. So kind of like a weird, like you hear about things like that. I always go back to The Office, but like it's very known that there's like versions of The Office in many different countries.
It's weird how common it is. Like it's something I learned from doing this show. How like almost every show has a foreign version.
But it's just kind of interesting to me to think that like Mad About You is a show that gets brought over, to multiple other countries.
This show was very popular.
Yeah, but here's the thing about a show like this, because like Paul Reiser is one of the creators of the show. And I was thinking about this before, because essentially your pitch when you're Paul Reiser and you're pitching the show to the networks, it's basically just based around your style of comedy. Because when you're pitching, I'm newlywed and it's me and my wife, like that's a million shows.
Yeah.
So the only thing that differentiates them is like the comedy styling of the lead actor in this, is what's going to drive them to purchase this show. So when you're just taking a show like that and like, we're going to make a Mad About You in Argentina, how does that read even remotely similar if the actor isn't being a Paul Reiser? You know what I mean? It's, I guess the basic premise is the same, but
now, did the Argentina one get 7 seasons?
That stuff I didn't look into, but
that could be the answer to your question. Maybe it didn't work.
Actually, I do have information on it. They got a second season, but it was scrapped later on. But I would just imagine that when you take a show like this and you adapt it for another country, essentially it's just a show about a couple. So without Paul Reiser being in it or something like that, how does it still feel about like?
Yeah, it still
sucks.
Feel like there's not one of those shows is even close to being as good as its American or whatever origin it was counterpart. Like it's just
because the whole thing's
just trying to make the money,
actor.
and it's just like Bollywood almost garbage. It's
the only example I can think of the foreign show being more successful is The Office, and that was our version.
And that's rare. That's very rare that happens.
Right, and I couldn't even tell you. I don't really know what's happening. The various other versions of that show from around the world. I couldn't tell you what's.
I wonder if there are people like us in different countries, like in Argentina or whatever, where they're just like, ugh, the American version of Mad About You was not funny.
Yeah,
but ours is so much better.
I keep trying to watch it. I just can't get through it. Yeah, exactly.
Like we all appreciate and respect the UK Office, but we are such nerds about the American one.
Yeah, so let's just get into the green light and cancels. I'm going to go in the order I see you in. So, Gordo, let's start with you.
Cancel. I didn't like the show when it was on, for obvious reasons. I was a kid. I didn't really like the show when I watched it. Just something about it just didn't do it for me. It just wasn't. It was funny, but it didn't make me laugh a lot, and I think that
anything sans an Abbott and Costello joke.
I mean, seriously, that was the only time that I laughed at that. And that can't be the only thing that I laugh at. So it's got to cancel for me. Too many couples.
Joe.
Sorry, this is me. So when we were tasked with doing this show, I was like bummed out about it. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't want to watch this show. I hated this as a kid, blah, blah, blah. Kelsey usually watches shows with me. She was like, Mad About You? No, thanks. I'm going to do something else. I watched this. Afterwards, I went up to her. I was like, we're going to watch the show, I think. She was like, there's no way. And I told her about like the Moore scene and like all the stuff that was happening. And she was like, oh, shit. And like maybe it's because I am 35 and married, and a lot of this now is just sort of like it. I guess it does resonate for as little as I have in common with their lives. 1982 New York filmmakers or whatever. A lot of it really resonated, and I laughed a lot at this. I never thought I would enjoy, and I love Paul Reiser. I never thought I would enjoy this show. I really did, and it's a pass for me. It's a green light.
Nick.
I'm kind of with Joe on this, where I really didn't enjoy this show. I mean, I remember seeing it, and I was never thrilled to have it be on the TV, and I was curious to see how it translated nowadays as we are older, and I agree. I do think it was more entertaining now. Like Joe said, they live different lifestyles than I would, but they're, the same issues can come up with us and them. I had fun watching it. I liked the rest of the cast. Richard Kine's always a home run, and I do want to see more. I didn't know where this one was going to go with me. Like, I was right down the middle before I watched it, and I watched it, and I do have to. I'm going to greenlight it.
This was your choice, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Ferg.
Watching this show made me wish that the F5 got Helen Hunt and Twister. And yeah, easiest cancel we've ever had. I hated every second of this show. Every second.
Easiest
I was
cancel.
bored. I didn't think any character was likable aside from Paul Reiser. And yeah, to compare it to Seinfeld, so they both felt like shows about nothing, but Seinfeld was in a fun way. This was in a boring ass way where it's like, I don't want to watch a couple fight for a half hour during an awkward situation like dinner. That's just me, but yeah, cancel.
All right, well, it's on to me, and before I even get into it, I
tiebreaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
First, to comment on what you just said, to bring it up again, I think it should be noted that one of the most popular episodes of The Office was the dinner party, which is a very awkward, uncomfortable dinner where the couple was fighting.
One of the best
Very
ones of all
different,
time.
very different. But so we're 2-2 right now. So I guess it's on to me. And you know what? I'm gonna actually go ahead and side with Joe and Nick. When you first suggested that we do this episode, I'm just like Joe. I was like, oh.
I did that myself. I wasn't like, oh, I love this show. I just kind of wanted to do it. Yeah.
And I went into it like, okay, like I said before, I remembered nothing about this show. I just remember its existence, and having seen it, but nothing stuck. And, again, like what Joe was saying, I just think we're older and you just resonate different with these characters, and the situation seemed realistic enough. I don't think it was a perfect show by any means. There are things I would change. I thought, like I said, a couple writing things seemed a little lazy to me. I didn't really like the Selby character at all. I thought he was too generic. I don't think he did anything that was that funny. But in general, I liked it. And whenever I think a show sticks with you, is relatable like that, I did want to keep watching. And had I not been taking my notes probably like right up until the moment we had to record this episode, I probably would have snuck a little bit of episode 2 in. So that's it, guys. 3 yeses out of 5. So you do pass, Matt About You. Congratulations. You live on to see another day. You've made it to episode 2 with us. So I want to just remind everyone once again, go to S1E1pod.com. That's where you can find all the links to our social media, every link to where you can listen to us, rate, review, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. It means a lot to us. Spread the word. Let people know that we exist. That's all the time we have today. Real quick before we close out, though, because it was mentioned, I do want to mention how attractive Helen Hunt looked in Twister. But moving on, that's it for today. See you guys next week. Goodbye.
I think we got the best Richard kind.
Yes, we did.